and seriously damages the legitimate rights and interests of China. So that news in the last couple of minutes that China will impose additional tariffs of 34% effective from April 10th. And this is all having an impact on the markets. As you can see, the FTSE taking another hammering today, down 3.68%. We'll be looking at that and indeed the rest of the business news on Business Live here on Sky News after this quick commercial break. Do stay tuned. The top business stories live from the Sky Newsroom. China retaliates to Donald Trump's trade sanctions with reciprocal tariffs of 34% on all US goods, triggering a trade war. While US stocks plunged by the most since the depths of the pandemic, erasing $2.5 trillion in value. Jeep and Chrysler maker Stellantis furloughs 900 workers at 5 plants in the US and temporarily shuts production in Canada and Mexico. Plus, we'll speak to German-headquartered Siemens Mobility about how the €10 billion company plans to respond to American sanctions on the European Union. Very good morning on this Friday, Business Live, with me, Darren Mccaffrey. We're going to start with that breaking news that China's finance ministry in the last couple of minutes has said it will impose additional tariffs of 34% on all US goods from next Thursday. And it is in retaliation to those sweeping import taxes that we've seen imposed by Donald Trump this week. The US president has defended his actions after his economic sanctions wiped roughly $2.5 trillion off Wall Street yesterday. Meanwhile, US stock futures are pointing to a continuing sell-off when the markets open this afternoon. And the FTSE 100 is currently on track for its worst weekly performance since August 2023. Well, President Trump has said he had expected his plans to set off functions in the financial markets.
It was a sick patient. It went through an operation on Liberation Day, and it's going to be a booming country. A very booming country. It's going to be amazing, actually.
Let's bring in Sri Koshagovindan, a senior economist at Aberdeen. Good to see you as always. We're seeing now this trade war really take on massive consequences, aren't we, with China's retaliatory tariffs this morning?
Absolutely. So we had step one, which was the US announcements, and now we're into step two, phase two. How do countries actually respond to this? And China has responded very firmly there with 34%. We can expect further retaliation from some other countries as well. And I think this is the dangerous part in terms of how this will impact the global economy. So we can think about the direct impact it has on each country, but there's an indirect impact on how this will persistent an escalation in tariffs can have quite a meaningful impact on growth globally, not just on the US. I think it's quite interesting that the US take at the moment is for this all to be short-term pain, long-term gain, but really that depends on how long this uncertainty persists. It's very bad for confidence, and the longer the stock market continues to sell off, it's very bad for households in the US and what happens to consumer spending going forward. Also, there's an inflationary impact as well. So this combination of hit to growth and hit to inflation may not be very good for the US.
And that's the interesting thing, though, isn't it? That almost irrespective of what happens now, as in whether Donald Trump negotiates individual deals with companies, whether he has to row back a little bit, that uncertainty is not going to go away, because fundamentally he views tariffs as a negotiating tool. And by that's very nature, it means that over the next 3 years, he could and may well use it at any stage. And businesses are going to have to deal with all of that.
Absolutely. I think if we just take the case of the UK, for example, we've got the minimum tariff of 10%. That's the broad-based tariff. But we also have, don't forget, the autos tariff, 25%. Going forward, as you say, the uncertainty, what if there are sector-based tariffs as well in the future? These are the different moving parts that will start to stack up. And that's what different countries are starting to think about. How do we deal with this? Do we go in with a conciliation, trying to negotiate? Or, as we've seen with China, do you go in full force and say, this is illegal, this is bullying, etc.? But I think from the UK's perspective, so far it seems that there seems to be a negotiation stance, and there could be some diversion of trade as well. But nonetheless, as this is materializing, it's going to have, based on the OBR estimates, if we take the initial scenarios and sort of account for the 10%, there will be a small drag on the UK GDP of just under 0.5%, just based on those OBR estimates. But again, it depends on how long it takes. If it's a swift negotiation from the US across different countries, then the impact will be more limited. But it's going to take a number of weeks at least, unfortunately. There are so many countries involved.
Indeed. And what's fascinating here, though, is that different countries are at the moment doing different things. It's clear the UK is trying to cut a deal and is kind of standing back somewhat and taking this. But then obviously China's reacted this morning. We're expecting the European Union probably to react too. And there's been kind of criticism, not just of the tariffs themselves, but many saying it's not terribly sophisticated, that the US administration, the Trump administration, have essentially looked at the trade deficits and just decided to hit countries on that pure basis. Whereas, I mean, the European Union may have its faults, but it is very good at trade. I mean, that's fundamentally what the EU is about. And it could cause a lot of damage to the United States if it really wanted to. And it may well do if it decides to really properly hit back.
I think that combination of different countries and big trading partners as well, China and Europe together, could be quite difficult for the US. They are talking quite strong at the moment, But there's a question mark. How long will they hold out if there is a material impact to US jobs, US inflation? And if this US stock market sell-off continues, or global stock market sell-off continues for a meaningful period of time, you could see a shift in tone from the US. So there are two questions. Is this a revenue-generating policy from tariffs, or is this a negotiating policy? If it's revenue generating and these policies stick and they stand by the initial numbers, then this will have a meaningful impact on the US economy, and that will happen over the course of the second half of the year. And again, that has spillovers to other economies as well. So it's very difficult for them to stick with this, I believe.
Okay, Shri Kochugovindan from Aberdeen, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Well, the effects of Donald Trump's universal 25% import tax on cars is already being felt. Factories in Mexico have stopped taking orders of Nissan's Infiniti SUVs destined for the US market. The tariff means the model is no longer profitable. Meanwhile, carmaker Stellantis yesterday furloughed 900 US workers at 5 plants in the United States and has temporarily shut down production in Canada and Mexico. The news comes as a think tank has warned that 25,000 UK jobs in auto manufacturing could be lost. Well, let's speak to Mike Hawes, Chief Executive at the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders. Just first of all, Mike, if we can, reflect that, as we've said, these tariffs are already starting to bite, with people having to make decisions now about how they plan for the weeks, months and years ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can see the immediacy that the industry's had to respond, because you can see what's happening in terms of demand. Footfall in showrooms will be immediately determined. So, you've seen companies make these quick steps to try and plan for what they're going to do for the short to medium term. As always, what we've seen, we don't know exactly how long the tariff regime is going to last. Is it open for negotiation? Will there be pauses if you get certain outcomes? So, you can understand how all companies are taking hopefully a calm approach while you plan for the next few months.
And when we look at here in the UK in particular, this tariff of 25% is in place. Car manufacturing is important, isn't it, to the UK economy? The US is a big taker of our cars. What is the impact in terms of what you can see with the factories we've got and the tens of thousands of people who work in that industry?
Yeah, well, the US is our second biggest export market after the European Union. However, in terms of the brands that export to the US, they tend to be our small volume, high value manufacturers. If you think Jaguar, Land Rover, Bentley, Rolls-Royce, Aston Martin, McLaren, we've got such a fantastic stable of these brands. They export globally, but somewhere between a third and for some of them over a half of their output goes to the US. So it's a critical market. Given the size of that, it's not easy to substitute it to other markets, because you're talking about underlying levels of demand. And you're also talking about the bespoke nature of these products. They make cars to order for specific customers. If those customers start withdrawing, and I think you're already seeing that, because they know between placing an order and getting the car is going to be a number of months, so they will be subject to the tariff. You can see that they have to sort of look again at their production output and see how you can manage a reduced output for as long as I said, is necessary. What really matters, bottom line, is can we get that deal?
OK, Mike, while we've got you, we should reflect this story that slightly got sidelined by all the news this week from the Competition and Markets Authority, who essentially have fined lots of car manufacturers some £77 million around illegally agreeing not to compete with each other when it comes to advertising the number or the percentage of the cars that are recycled. It's quite extraordinary, isn't it, that so many car manufacturers acted illegally, as the Competition and Markets Authority have branded it, in where we're at. I mean, consumers will be concerned about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think all the manufacturers have accepted the guilt and recognised they're now having to pay fines as a penalty. This relates to incidents that took place between I think 2001 and 2016, 2017, and all I can say is that with everyone recognises and has endeavoured to put in place measures to prevent any recurrence of that behaviour.
OK, Mike, appreciate your time this morning. Mike Hawes there from the Motor Manufacturing and Traders Society. Thank you. Germany's outgoing Chancellor Olaf Scholz has described Trump's economic sanctions as fundamentally wrong. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has called them a unilateral attack, and the French President Emmanuel Macron termed them brutal, unfounded, and certain to have a massive impact on the European economy. So how will European businesses respond? Let's speak to Rob Morris, who's Joint Chief Executive and Managing Director of the German-based Siemens Mobility, and joins me now. A very good morning to you, Rob. Of course, Siemens is a big company with many different factories and outlets in different countries across Europe. Frankly, it is not good news, isn't it? What are Siemens doing, and what do you think the impact will be?
Well, first of all, good morning and thank you for having me on your programme. And you're quite right, we are a global organisation, and we've been around since for the last 175 years or so, and I'm here in Chippenham at the moment talking about an 100 million investment in a new facility to take over from a facility that we currently have here in Chippenham, and that's around train command and control signalling, as it were. But just to answer your question, of course we have been monitoring this week's events with great interest. We are a global organisation. We believe in easy access to markets, and we do that by investment, rather like this we're doing here in Britain. We're invested in the US, and when we look here in Britain, this is around a facility that uses R&D engineers. We've got our own product designers, our own manufacturing capability, through to, well, full systems control on the railways. So British jobs for the British industry with the British supply chain, and that's really where we focus. We try to keep our capability localised wherever we can, but we also export, and that's what this facility will do when it comes online in about 12 months' time next summer. 50% of what we do will actually be exported, but not materially to the US, actually, because we're already investing in the US separately.
And that's why you're at that site there in Chippenham, aren't you? As you say, £100 million state-of-the-art investments. And it is a reminder, that there is investment happening in the UK. Have you found that essentially for a company like Siemens that's been around in Britain for a very long time, that the economic environment at the moment, the political winds, allow a company like yours to properly invest here in Britain?
Yeah, we've always been invested, as you quite rightly say. We've been here for as part of two centuries, and we've gone through global conflict during those times and pandemics and all sorts of things. And of course, we have challenging times. We know here in the UK it's challenging times at the moment, but we also know that the government have said that they're keen to have growth, and infrastructure is a key part of growth. We are doing our bit. We're investing again in new technology or new facilities that enable new technology to go onto the railway, and what we're keen for the government to do is to back that up with the right investment in rail and transport as part of the comprehensive spending review. And that will be good for jobs, of course. It will be good for our supply chain, and we've got something like 2,500 suppliers, of which half of those, or nearly half of those, are actually SME organisations. So investment is key to growth.
OK, and just very finally, Rob, you talked about investment, but you also talked about how these are slightly troubling times. You know, you look at the impact that US tariffs are likely to have on UK GDP. KPMG are saying this morning it's likely to fall 0.8%. You know, at a time in which we've got pretty tepid growth, that is a lot. You're a big global firm. You trade a lot. You invest a lot in different countries. You guys must be concerned that the next couple of years are going to be very, very difficult indeed. That things are going to could take quite a significant downturn.
Of course, what we try to do is invest in our businesses so that we're doing the right thing to enable our clients and governments to do things more efficiently and more effectively at a lower cost base. And so we do that by, as I say, modifying our business organically to deal with that, but also through very clever acquisitions as well. And our global chief exec has nominated or has identified a couple of those in the last month or so. So it is very much around how do we maintain a sustainable business that's based on technology and one that's fit for the future.
OK, Rob, thank you for your time and good luck with that £100 million investment there in Chippenham this morning. Rob Morris there from Siemens. Thank you. Just to let you know, we are expecting a press conference from the NATO Secretary-General, Mark Rutte, in Brussels any minute now, and we'll, of course, bring you that here on Sky News. But for the time being, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be up next with a look at the markets that have taken an absolute battering over the last 24 hours or so. The FTSE down nearly 4% this morning. We'll be looking at that in detail after this quick break. Do stay tuned.
The only way into Gaza for us right now is with the Israeli military. The IDF had brought us in to show us a tunnel network under a residential neighbourhood.
The length of time it must have to have created these tunnels must have taken years.
At the end of the day, it's war at the top. It's war down here.
I'm Alistair Bunkle, Sky's Middle East correspondent based here in Jerusalem.
As we were filming, there was a gun battle in the next street.
This neighbourhood, the Israeli military say, was the stronghold of Hamas's Rafah brigade.
It was just after 6:30 a.m. when the first shots were fired.
I remember everything. It was a day that I don't think I'll ever be able to forget.
There's no moon, perfect conditions for smugglers and human traffickers trying to move fuel, weapons and people.
The valleys in between, they're some of the main smuggling routes.
After days of negotiation, a major smuggler here has agreed to meet us.
The families that we've spoken to of people who have died trying to cross into Europe, they say you're a murderer. Are you a murderer?
No.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Begum was 15 when she left East London with 2 school friends to join Islamic State in Syria.
Do you feel that you have committed a crime to the extent that you should serve time in a British prison?
I mean, I feel like the only crime I committed was coming here.
If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. I can take the heat. The second thing that Harry Truman said, was in politics, if you want a friend, get a dog.
My children will love a dog.
Days of meetings covering.
OK, we're just going to take you, as promised, to Brussels, where the NATO Secretary-General, Mark Rutte, is holding a press conference.
About US commitment to NATO and also a very clear expectation that Europe and Canada must take more responsibility for our shared security and continue to ramp up defense spending. The consensus from the discussions these 2 days is that as the world grows more dangerous, we need NATO more than ever. And we are united in our commitment to each other in this alliance. That commitment is not only principled, based on common values and shared history. It is deeply practical. We face real threats to our security, the most direct from Russia, but also from others, state and non-state. in the high north, from the south, on the eastern flank, and in cyberspace. Whatever the challenges we face, we need to make sure that we have the forces and capabilities necessary to deter aggression and defend ourselves should anyone make the mistake of attacking. So we will invest more, much more, as so many allies have already begun to do. We will produce more and more quickly. All over the alliance, we will work to cut red tape and reduce barriers to efficient defense industrial production in order to meet the very real demand for more defense capabilities. Over the last 2 days, we met among allies and with partners. We were joined by our Indo-Pacific partners, Australia, Japan, New Zealand, and the Republic of Korea. The security of the Indo-Pacific and the Euro-Atlantic is more connected than ever before. The war against Ukraine is but one example of this, as China, North Korea, and Iran continue to support Russia's war machine. This poses risks to us all, but we are attentive to those risks and determined to ensure we are equipped to address them. So we continue to strengthen our ties, including on defense industrial cooperation. Ministers discussed this yesterday, affirming how important it is that we continue to deepen NATO's partnerships in the region. And I will travel to Japan next week to do just that. We also met in the NATO-Ukraine Council with Ukraine's Foreign Minister, Andriy Sybiha. He gave us an update on the situation on the ground. Allies assured him of their continued support for Ukraine in its fight today and to help build up its armed forces for the future. And we discussed the important talks that the US is leading with Ukraine as well as with Russia to try to bring the war to a just and lasting end. We support the push for peace. And allies, including through efforts spearheaded by France and the UK, have shown that they are ready, willing and able to shoulder more responsibility in helping to secure peace when the time comes. NATO itself continues to provide political and practical support for Ukraine through our command in Wiesbaden, our office in Ukraine and more. And as announced on Wednesday, in the first 3 months of 2025, NATO allies have pledged more than 20 billion euros in security assistance for Ukraine. So our commitment is clear. We were also joined last night and again this morning by the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas. And we discussed how we can work together to boost defense spending and ramp up defense production. Kaja Kallas briefed allies on the white paper for European Defence Readiness 2030. The transatlantic relationship remains the cornerstone of European security and of global stability. And the inclusion of non-EU allies will remain essential. But we should build on this unique opportunity to strengthen NATO-EU cooperation even further. We all stand to gain by working together. And finally, as some of you may know, today is NATO's anniversary. 76 years ago, 12 countries came together to sign the treaty that created this alliance. Through the years working together, allies have delivered security through strength. From all I heard during the last 2 days, we are well on track to continue delivering well into the future. With that, I'm ready to take your questions.
All right, let's start with BBC.
Jonathan Beale, BBC. First of all, I know tariffs isn't NATO's bailiwick, but it is something that's come up at the meeting. China's just announced it's introducing retaliatory tariffs against the US after their imposition of tariffs. A lot of allies are worried about it. You want allies to spend more on defence. I mean, it is not helpful, is it, that the Trump administration has done this? And are you worried that it will impact countries' ability to spend money? And just secondly, on Ukraine, a lot of allies are worried that Russia's dragging its feet. Some allies think that there should be a deadline for President Putin to show that he is serious about ending the war in Ukraine. Would you like a deadline, and what would that deadline be? Thank you.
Yes, on the first question, as you know, we are here, NATO, but also the meeting we had the last 2 days is absolutely focused, laser focused on making sure that we keep NATO territory safe. That we realize that there is one long-term and enduring, unpleasantly enduring threat, and that is Russia. And that is what our focus has to be about. So that's why I'm not commenting about the tariffs, as you already... Yes, you're right, and that refers to Article 2 of the Washington Treaty. But even then, we have seen in the past that you will have discussions between members of the alliance on other issues than defense, which will not immediately impact the capability and the ability of allies to deliver on the common defense and security. So I think these two are really separate. We should keep them separate and should not get them to interfere in our discussions. And on the second question, I mean, as I said yesterday, the American administration, President Trump, they broke the deadlocks. They started the discussions. I think they have done so step by step in a very forceful but also a very deliberate manner. And that means that obviously now the ball is in the Russian court, so we have to see what happens. But I do not want to interfere in those talks by having my comments from Brussels to which they then have to react. So we'll see how this will develop. So far, I must say, I'm really impressed how the Americans are conducting those talks, and also about the fact that they keep the Europeans and Ukraine, Ukraine obviously, because they are very much involved, it is their country, but also the European allies very much updated of what they are doing and what is happening.
All right, woman in the red blazer here.
Mr. Secretary General, thank you for this opportunity. During these days, we have heard from you support for lasting peace for Ukraine. But actually, we still do not understand about what this concept means. In your view, how does NATO see the peace for Ukraine, and who should ensure it, and how?
Well, obviously there is no peace in Ukraine yet. That is exactly the problem. And the Americans are trying to get peace in Ukraine in a way that it is fair, that it is enduring. And the shortest answer to your question is that Putin will never ever try again to get 1 square kilometer or 1 square mile of Ukraine in the future. That he knows that there is a deterrence and a defense by which Ukraine can never be attacked in the future. When you look at NATO and more generally allies, what we are doing is providing Ukraine what they need to stay in the fight, and that is an enormous amount of defense support into Ukraine, defense equipment, including ammunition. We have the Czech initiative, we have on ammunition, we have the Danish and Lithuanian initiative on developing even inside Ukraine their own defense industrial base, and they still have a lot of capacity left, which with the right investment can be used and made available for both Ukraine but also for allies, maybe to even buy into that defense industrial base in the future. So these are very positive developments, but also direct deliveries of Panzer howitzers, of ammunition, of tanks, of air defense systems into Ukraine. So that's one. Second is that, of course, with Ukraine, and we know that the French and the Brits will take an initiative here, but NATO is, of course, also involved. We can help to build up the Ukrainian forces. We just opened in Poland, JTEC, which is a center where we will capture all the lessons learned in Ukraine. We have the command in Wiesbaden, which is very much involved in all the training activities when it comes to making sure that the Ukrainian army is in the future capable to defend itself, but also when it comes to making sure that all the defense industrial deliveries are done in such a way that they can be of maximum use to Ukraine. And we have the pledge, the 20 billion now over the first 3 months rolling in of euros. So all of this is what we are doing to make sure Ukraine can stay in the fight, and if ever there is a peace deal, that they can stay safe in the future. And there is the French and British initiative to build an extra layer of support post the peace deal. But unfortunately, there is not yet a peace deal. There's not even a ceasefire. And the Americans are working day and night to get that going.
All right. Thomas, the third row blue blazer.
Thanks for the question. Thomas Kutschka with Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Secretary General, I have to press you again on the